Supposedly the Green Bay Packers are looking at D-line again for this year's draft. And I gotta tell you, like sometimes rookies work out, sometimes they don't. I don't know. Anybody know what BJ Raji's up to? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Today, as I get back into recorded episodes, I decided let's do a mock draft. Yes, this is the fourth mock draft of the draft season, but this one, of course, coming after a little bit of a layoff. And now pro days are beginning to roll in, and we're getting a clearer and clearer picture of not only necessarily the Packers' intentions, but also the prospects themselves. So this is a full 7-round mock draft. This is the only one of these that I've done thus far, and I am excited to dive in with you. But first, a couple bits of news, because this is the NFL meetings going on right now, and Brian Gutekunst did take a little bit of time to speak with local beat reporters this morning. And when he did so, there were a few little nuggets that kind of got dropped. One, from the meetings themselves, the hip drop tackle, the much talked about tackle attempt. It's essentially where a player goes to tackle a defensive player going to an offensive player, obviously, and then they shift their body weight to essentially pull down the offending player. There's lots of information about this out there. If you're curious, ask in the comments, or you could obviously seek it out. But that tackle style is now banned. And the response thus far from NFL players, especially on the defensive side, has been less than stellar. So tackling may take on a greater emphasis this year. But the two tidbits of Packer-related news that really came out of Brian Gutekunst's conversation, as well as some inside reporting by Tom Silverstein in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, is Jordan Love has indeed had preliminary contract talks with the Packers about a new, very lucrative long-term contract. And as Tom Silverstein kind of added, he said that 50 million annual average value seems to be about the number that the two sides are talking about. Keep in mind as well that this contract cannot be signed until May, because a new extension can't be signed until 12 months have passed since the last extension, and he last signed in May. So bear that in mind. In addition, Tom Silverstein also noted that the Packers are potentially aiming to look at giving another extension to 28-year-old defensive tackle Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark, now with David Bakhtiari gone, has the highest cap number on the team this year at a cool $27 million. He also has a number next year of like void guarantees of $13 million. So there's definitely interest from the Packers to get an extension done and perhaps drag down some of those cap numbers while securing a player who still somehow is only 28 years old. So now that the news is out of the way, let us dive into our mock draft. So just before we get rolling in here, I did want to discuss a couple of the parameters for this mock draft. I utilized PFF's mock draft system. I did not utilize any trades because those are wildly unpredictable, and sometimes I do it just for fun on Twitter, just to see what happens. But in this setting, it just didn't make a lot of sense. And then I also, of course, utilized the Packers' needs, their typical thresholds, as well as their historical precedents. So even if we are still completely enamored with Tyler Nubin, probably not going to be a Packers selection anymore since his RAS came in under 3. Quick word about RAS too. Keep in mind that the Packers do not necessarily utilize the relative athletic score that us casual fans all discuss, but they certainly have their own athletic system just like RAS. And if Newman got under a 3 on that one, holy yikes, he's probably not going to be a Green Bay Packer. And then, of course, as well, just a quick refresher as to what the Packers' priorities very well might be in this draft, or the needs, let's say, not necessarily in the draft, but on the whole. So they certainly need a second starting safety next to Xavier McKinney. The only other safety on the roster right now happens to be last year's 7th-round pick, Anthony Johnson Jr. In addition to that, they still need another base linebacker. And it's someone, if they can start in the 4-2-5 nickel configuration as well, great. But right now they have Quay, they've got Isaiah McDuffie, they've got Eric Wilson, Welch re-signed, but they still need some kind of starter there. And then, of course, right guard. Sean Ryan did do a nice job in the rotation with John Runyan Jr. as the year came to a close. But is he someone that you, at this point, really want to hand a guaranteed full-blown starting job to, given his incremental development? Yeah, I don't know about that. And then just some secondary needs, offensive line depth, picking up a running back of the future. Because while A.J. Dillon did resign on a one-year deal, I'm a little hard-pressed to believe that that necessarily is going to change the Packers' draft intentions. And with Josh Jacobs being on a 4-year, $48 million deal, only $12.5 million of which is guaranteed, Packers might still be looking towards the future. And then, of course, secondary depth and defensive line reinforcements. So this is how the first round broke down. And this is the only round that I'm showing every single pick that occurred in the NFL. But you can tell, I know the other position that's talked about a lot for the Packers in round one happens to be the offensive line. Well, look at what I got handed in this mock draft here. Mims, gone. Guyton, gone. Barton, gone. Really, the only offensive lineman that carries a first-round grade, seemingly at this juncture, granted we don't know about the Packers side of things, but would be Jackson Powers-Johnson, who is a center or perhaps a guard in the NFL. And the Packers spending a first-round pick on an interior offensive lineman would be quite the step out from their traditional precedents. So I went with defensive back from Iowa, Cooper DeJean. And I know it's really easy to say, well, PFF has him ranked 9 out of all prospects. There's no way he's going to be a 25. Well, keep in mind, to this point, DeJean has not done any athletic testing. Yes, it's projected that he would have a mighty high RAS, but to this juncture, he hasn't necessarily tested yet. Maybe that's causing a little bit of a slide. And frankly, I do think PFF's overall ranking of 9 was always a shade high for what he was probably going to be drafted at. Now, we'll find out. But nonetheless, he was available on this board, and you bet I took him. So why Cooper DeJean? It goes a lot more besides just his position. We know that Brian Gutekunst loves to spend first-round picks in a certain way. Highly athletic guys with a high RAS, right? Versatile, young, high level of competition collegiately, and of course a premium position. Cooper DeJean fits every single one of those. Even his size, being 6 foot, 203 pounds, it does meet the Packers' thresholds at either cornerback or safety. As I mentioned, we don't know about his athletic testing yet, but he does project to have a very high RAS if indeed he does get to test sometime before the draft. In terms of his on-the-field fit, he is a master in zone coverage who's proven at a minimum to at least be competent with the means to excel in man coverage. There are some reservations, and I understand this about how aggressive his handwork is in man coverage and whether that can actually translate to the NFL or if he's going to be flagged all the time. But overall, the tools for him to excel in man, they're all there. This past season, DeJean allowed a 37.8 quarterback rating when targeted, 49.7 the year prior, certainly a good trend. And his ball skills, while they did drop a little bit this last season, over the last 2 years combined, he's amassed 7 interceptions and 9 pass breakups, while posting a missed tackle percentage of 12% and 3%. For defensive back, he can do it all. He can play every spot, whether you want to put him at the opposite starting safety next to Xavier McKinney, whether you want to give him as competition with Keyshawn Nixon in the nickel, or even put him at outside corner. While that may be the worst fit of the bunch, Cooper DeJean can do it all. And so makes a lot of sense for him in round 1. In round 2, another apple of so many Green Bay Packer fans' eyes right now, and reportedly of the Packers themselves, because they supposedly love Edgerrin Cooper, and we now know at this point that the 22-year-old linebacker was indeed a Packers top 30 visit. So you'd think they got some interest there as well. With a 9.26 RAS, size at 6'2", 230, only being 22 years of age, it's easy to see why he makes sense as an early second-round pick for the Green Bay Packers. He's got athleticism for days. Last year he logged 56 stops while also mustering 10 sacks, according to PFF's data tracking. Disruption is what he does. I do have one concern. I know I picked him here, but I do have one overall concern, though. And I know others have talked about it. Justice Mosqueda of Acme Packing Company, he's mentioned it before, and I do tend to agree. When I watch him, I see a lot of things that are very reminiscent to Quay Walker. And the Packers have said before that in this new defense, Quay is probably going to be the weak side backer. So is Cooper going to be the Mike? Are they going to put him at Sam if they pick him? I'm not sure on the fit. I'm a little worried that it's overly redundant with the player that they already have. Or maybe they just don't care and they just want to get a really disruptive force on the field, in which case, kind of hard to disagree with. Next up in the second round, pick 58, Jalen Wright, running back from Tennessee. someone who's shot up draft boards following a very strong combine. Wright is a dynamic athlete who's a home run threat every single time that he touches the ball. And he's still only 20 years old. Bigger than you'd think given his speed too, coming in at 210 pounds with a height of 5'10". It's believed that the Packers cutoff at running back is 5'9". So, hey, Wright qualifies. He's coming off his first 1,000-yard collegiate season where he averaged 4.35 yards after contact. He also logged one of the top elusive ratings in the country, according to PFF, at 132.2. Also, looking at a very underrated aspect, not only of his game, but of what the Packers value at the running back position. He's a competent pass protector. Is he perfect at it? No, but he's competent, which is certainly a lot more than you can say about a lot of other speed backs. As I mentioned earlier, with Dillon basically on a one-year deal, Jacobs on a year-by-year contract, it makes sense for the Packers to find the lightning to the rest of their thunder room in the running back field. So Jalen Wright, I think, makes a world of sense in round 2 at pick 58. In round 3, another safety, or maybe the first safety, depending on what you do with DeGene, Dadrian Taylor Demerson, safety out of Texas Tech. Man's got an 8.72 RAS. The size does come in a little bit under how they generally like their safeties. 5'10", that's kind of passable, but the 197 pounds, dude might have to go eat some cheese curds before getting on the scale for the Packers. But nonetheless, he's close enough. And the Packers, still, as I said at the top, they need more safeties. Following a strong season at Texas Tech, Demerson feels like a day 2 pick, which is why we got him here in round 3. Perhaps his greatest asset appears to be range, but it's not just that. It's his ability to diagnose, read the offense, and then go make a play. According to NFL Draft Buzz, a few of his strengths are: he exemplifies advanced route anticipation, enabling effective slot coverage and post-snap adjustments. Capable of recovering quickly to disrupt passes. Utilizes a proficient wrap and roll technique for reliable tackling. Hopefully it's not hip dropping. Demonstrates a strong leadership presence, significantly influencing team dynamics and performance. Exhibits exceptional speed and quickness, allowing for effective man coverage and close on plays rapidly. Extensive special teams experience, indicating a well-rounded understanding of football fundamentals. And Rich Bisaccia's heart grew 3 times this day. Look, I mean, it makes sense. He probably would fit in as your backup post safety behind McKinney, and certainly someone that they can develop. Someone who has drawn some player comps, even to what Mathau used to be, the Honey Badger. I think you can find room for that, or an exception for that, in your drafts. Next pick, another third rounder, pick 91. Another top 30 visit for the Green Bay Packers, Michael Hall Jr. He's a bit of a tweener on the defensive line. He's capable of playing off tackle, or as a 3, or as a 5. And depending on where we are in this offseason process, his weight has ranged anywhere from 280 to 290-ish, which is believed that he's at about now. Jim Nagy, the overall runner of the Senior Bowl, he believes, after Michael Hull Jr. came off a dominant Senior Bowl, he believes that Michael Hull Jr. is going to be a better pro than he was a collegiate player. And frankly, that's really saying something. Somehow, Michael Hull Jr. is still only 20 years old, still somehow growing even, and he's got a RAS of 924. Shades of a younger and lighter Kenny Clark loom large over the young disruptor out of Ohio State. The Packers, in terms of fit, unless they plan on using him, maybe like they might use Carl Brooks this year, kind of a tweener, someone who can go off tackle, someone who may be playing more interior as a defensive tackle. They may ask him to beef up, get up to where their preference is at 300, 305. Or maybe they just like him as a tweener and something that Jeff Hafley can add to his toolbox. Either way, the Packers' interest is apparent as he was in for a top 30 visit. Moving on to round 4, pick 126. A slight deviation to begin day 3. And I know you may be thinking, well, they don't need a wide receiver, right? They've got Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, Melton. Yeah, and then Heath, DuBose, Samari Toure. There's certainly a plethora of options in the receiving game, but I would argue Cornelius Johnson is just a little bit different. He's got a 991 RAS. He's 6'3", 212 pounds, the kind of size the Green Bay Packers covet at the wide receiver position. And yes, he is a little bit older at 23 years of age. One of the things that I really, really liked is when you go listen to him speak, when you look up his profiles, he is a willing participant in both run blocking as well as a special teamer. The website Steelers Depot and their film review of him goes so far as to say that not only is he a good run blocker, he's aggressive and an effective run blocker. He's got the size. He knows how to use his size. One of the real drawbacks is that he never had some kind of highlight reel season at Michigan, that his production never seemed to match the athletic tools that are there. At the same time, Michigan did run the ball a lot. And that's actually an area that Johnson somehow seemed to really do quite well in as a blocker. He needs to enhance his route tree. Yes, he needs more refinement in route running overall, definitely. But in this wide receiver class, Cornelius Johnson realistically most years would go higher. Now, you might be able to get him in the 4th round. And given his athletic profile, given his willingness, it certainly is a project the Packers can afford to take on at this time. And I know, you're thinking, John, you said offensive line was such a big need. Where are they? Well, we didn't get one till round 5. And I will admit that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses of this draft. But here we are, round 5, pick 169, Jalen Sundle, the offensive tackle from North Dakota State. At this time, he does not have a complete RAS. He did not do athletic testing at the combine, but he's got the size. He's got the versatility you'd expect out of a day 3 Packers O-lineman. He comes from a highly successful program, which we knew Gutekunst also values, and at least watching him play, he's got the mobility that they covet. He's got 3 years experience as a starting center, as well as 2 at left tackle. One, he seemed to start part of the year. The other, this last season, he started the entire year. His career snaps at each position, 967 at left tackle, 1,362 at center. For a round 5 offensive lineman, he makes a lot of sense. Moving on into round 6, little double dip here for the Packers. As in round 6, pick 202, they grab Tanner Bortolini, the interior offensive lineman from Wisconsin. He had a 979 RAS. He's 6'4", 303 pounds. He's one of the most athletic offensive linemen in this entire draft. He's got experience pulling and really moving on the offensive line, which the Packers do generally value. And you want to talk about versatility, the man's logged career snaps at 4 of the 5 offensive line positions. The only one that he hasn't would be left tackle. I know a lot of Packer fans don't exactly think much of him as a center given his snapping. And maybe that's part of the equation here overall. Maybe he should just stick to guard in the NFL. But he's highly mobile. He excels in pass protection. He's versatile, and he's got the size. That does seem to sound like a Packer offensive lineman. And frankly, he's very reminiscent of a former day 3 pick for the Packers, John Runyon Jr. Maybe a direct replacement. So, moving on in round 6, their second round 6 selection. This one would be pick 219. Cedric Johnson, the edge out of Ole Miss, 9'6" RAS, one of the single most athletic players still on the board at all for any position. 6'3", 260 pounds. Generally, the Packers like their edge players to be 265 plus, but hey, maybe he's still growing. He's 21 years of age. Last year for Ole Miss, he logged 4 sacks and 32 pressures in 12 games. With Kingsley Enagbare out, there is kind of a hole at depth at edge. Now, maybe in this new defense, Kobe Wooden's going to kick it outside and be more of an edge player. Maybe Carl Brooks finds his home there. Maybe an addition like Michael Hull Jr. Regardless, right now, there is, once you get down the depth chart, a little bit of questioning because Kingsley Enagbare is out. So at the very least, bring in a highly athletic, great-sized player who does have some productivity in college to compete with Brenton Cox Jr. for a depth edge spot. Moving on now to the round 7 selections. I said at the beginning that tackling may be at the forefront, so let's go with another safety, this one from Oregon State, Keaton Oladopo. Again, round 7, pick 245. He's got an 8'2" RAS, 6'2", 216. That's the kind of size they like at safety. He is 23 years old, but here's the thing. Our third round safety, Demerson from Texas Tech, he's probably a little bit more of a post safety in the NFL. At least his range would seem to indicate such. Oladipo? No, this guy is a box safety. Put him in the box and let him wreak havoc. He is ultra aggressive. Now, maybe in the NFL, perhaps a little too aggressive, and it's going to get him flagged occasionally. But nonetheless, that is something they could use out of a box safety, especially this far down the draft and this far down the roster as he would project. Also, tackling. Sometimes he does over pursue. Sometimes his tackle attempts are a little over aggressive, but he is a surefire tackle and certainly not afraid to mix it up. This is ultimately someone at this point in the draft that the Packers could attempt to invest in. And our last pick, round 7, pick 255, Sam Hartman, quarterback from Notre Dame. Look, a while back, Brian Gutekunst said that it's time to get back to drafting quarterbacks. Last year, he spent a day 3 selection on Sean Clifford, who now is the backup to Jordan Love. Maybe another day 3 selection this year for competition purposes. Maybe they just want to put him on the practice squad. But look, here's the deal. Hartman did not exactly test that incredibly well with the 3.75 RAS. But his size is pretty close to what the Packers like. It's 6'1", 211 pounds. He's certainly a little bit older, which isn't the worst thing for the quarterback position, especially as a backup coming in at 24 years of age. So kind of the same thing in some ways as Sean Clifford, kind of an intangible selection, if you will. But the thing with Hartman, he comes from a highly successful program at Notre Dame, or depending on where your college allegiance lies, maybe not that successful. But he certainly was the best statistical quarterback left on the board at this point. When you were talking about Tua's little brother was still there, Carter Bradley was still there. Out of the quarterbacks, if you're picking one, it probably should be Sam Hartman. And I will say this, he gets kind of a bad rap for not having a good deep ball. I think it's kind of an underrated aspect of his game, and I do think it makes some sense. So there you have it. Rounds 1 through 7. I see it's a tiny bit clipped off. I'm sorry about that. But you got Cooper, Edgerrin Cooper, Jalen Wright, Demerson, Michael Hall Jr., Cornelius Johnson, Jalen Sundell, Tanner Bortolini, Cedric Johnson, Keaton Oladipo, and Sam Hartman. Now, look, I said somewhere in all of this that one of the weaknesses of this draft is realistically the lack of offensive linemen until round 5. Royce Newman right now is the Packers' only depth on the interior offensive line. He also it's logical, and I was still surprised when I learned this. He has the 5th highest cap number of offensive players for the Packers right now at over $3 million. Both of those facts seem rather unsustainable as we head towards the season. So depending on where Sundell plays in the NFL, maybe tackle or guard. And Bortolini, certainly interior at guard. So do the Packers still need some offensive lineman reinforcements beyond this if this is the way the draft goes? Yeah. And ultimately, I do think in reality, the Packers won't wait until round 5 to nab an offensive lineman. But sometimes it's just the way that the board works. Thank you so much for checking out Lombardi Time Brews. I do hope you enjoyed this. On Wednesday, I'll be back with a live video at 4 o'clock. And then this coming Friday, unless there's some big news that diverts attention elsewhere, this Friday will be another mock draft roundup where we survey the national analysts and see what they have to say about what the Packers should do in the upcoming draft. Thanks so much, everybody. And as always, go Pack Go.